The wind howled through the pines like a pack of wolves on the hunt, rattling the shutters of the cabin perched halfway up the mountain. Inside, the fire crackled low, casting long shadows on the walls. Elias and Caleb Carter, the mountain man twins, sat at the rough-hewn table, sharpening their knives with slow, deliberate strokes. They were built like bears, broad-shouldered, thick-bearded, and quiet in a way that made most folks uneasy. The twins didn't need words to understand each other. A glance, a grunt, a shift in posture, it was enough. Outside, the storm rolled in, turning the world into a blur of snow and darkness. It was the kind of night that made even the hardiest of men think twice about venturing out. But the twins weren't expecting company, and that made the creak of the floorboard behind them all the more jarring. Elias froze mid-stroke, his knife hovering over the whetstone. Caleb's hand drifted toward the rifle leaning against the wall. The firelight flickered, and there she was, a girl no older than 23, standing in the doorway like she owned the place. She was soaked to the bone, her blonde hair plastered to her face, but her smirk was dry as a bone. A revolver hung low on her hip, and her fingers twitched like she was itching to use it. "Evenin', boys," she drawled, stepping further into the cabin. "Didn't figure you'd mind if I borrowed a bit of shelter from the storm." Caleb's voice was a low growl. "Ain't no shelter for thieves here." The girl laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Thieves? Now, I ain't stolen nothin' yet. But I reckon you got somethin' worth talkin'." Her eyes darted around the cabin, lingering on the pelts hung near the fire, the sacks of grain, the gleam of the twins' rifles. She wasn't just arrogant, she was reckless. And that made her dangerous. Elias set his knife down. "You got a name, girl?" "Lila," she said, tossing her head. "Lila Dawson. And I ain't just any girl. I'm the one who's gonna walk outta here with your winter stores, unless you got a better offer." Caleb chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Ain't no offers for the likes of you. Turn around and walk back out that door, and we'll forget this ever happened." Lila's hand hovered over her revolver. "Or what? You'll throw me out in the storm? I'd like to see you try." The twins exchanged a look. They'd dealt with outlaws before, desperate men, hardened by the wilderness. But Lila was something else. She was young, brash, and too damn sure of herself. And that kind of arrogance was a liability in the mountains. Elias stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You got till the count of 3 to leave, girl." 1. Lila's smirk didn't waver. "Or what?" 2. She drew her revolver in a flash, the metal glinting in the firelight. "I ain't leavin', duh." Caleb sighed, like he was dealing with a particularly stubborn coyote. 3. What happened next was a blur. Elias lunged, his massive hand clamping around Lila's wrist before she could squeeze the trigger. The revolver clattered to the floor as Caleb kicked it away. Lila snarled, twisting in Elias's grip, but he held her fast, her feet dangling above the ground. "Let me go, you overgrown ox," she spat. Caleb picked up the revolver, examining it with a critical eye. "Nice piece. But it ain't gonna do you no good now." Lila's eyes burned with fury. "You'll regret this." Elias set her down, but he didn't let go. "Regret what?" "Teachin' a thief a lesson." She wrenched her arm free, rubbing her wrist. "You ain't seen the last of me." Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Oh, we know. But you ain't leavin' tonight. Storm's too bad." Lila's eyes narrowed. "You ain't keepin' me prisoner." "Ain't a prisoner if you ain't tryin' to leave," Elias said, tossing a blanket at her. "Dry off. Your drip pin all over the floor." Lila caught the blanket, her expression torn between outrage and reluctant gratitude. She wrapped it around her shoulders, glaring at the twins like she was memorizing their faces for a wanted poster. The twins went back to their knives, but the tension in the cabin was thicker than the storm outside. Lila wasn't just a thief, she was a problem. And problems in the mountains had a way of turning deadly. The fire popped and hissed as Lila draped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, her eyes never leaving the twins. She wasn't shivering anymore, but the cold still clung to her bones, a reminder of how close she'd come to freezing out there. The twins acted like she wasn't even there, their focus back on their knives, the rhythmic scrape of steel against stone filling the silence. But Lila knew better. They were watching her, just like she was watching them. She shifted her weight, testing the limits of their indifference. "You two always this quiet, or is it just me?" Caleb didn't look up. "Ain't got nothin' to say to you." Elias, though, glanced at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "You talk enough for the three of us." Lila smirked. "That's 'cause I got things worth sayin'." Caleb finally set his knife down, leaning back in his chair. "Like what? How you were plannin' to rob us blind?" She shrugged, the blanket slipping slightly. "A girl's gotta eat. And you two got more than enough to spare." Elias's voice was low, almost a rumble. "We work for what we got. You just take." Lila's grin turned sharp. "Life ain't fair, mountain man. You oughta know that better than anyone." Caleb stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Fair's got nothin' to do with it. You're alive, 'cause we let you be. Don't forget that." Lila tilted her head, studying him. "So what now? You keep me here till the storm passes, then kick me out with nothin'?" Elias picked up a pot from the fire, ladling stew into a bowl. He set it on the table in front of her. "Eat, then sleep. You ain't goin' nowhere till mornin'." Lila eyed the stew, then the twins. "Poisoned." Caleb rolled his eyes. "If we wanted you dead, you'd be dead." She hesitated, then grabbed the bowl, blowing on the steam rising from it. The first spoonful was heaven, warm, hearty, filling the hollow ache in her stomach. She tried to hide how good it was, but the twins saw the way her shoulders relaxed, the way her grip on the spoon loosened. Elias sat back down, watching her. "Where you from, Lila Dawson?" She swallowed, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Here and there. Mostly Texas, for things got too hot." Caleb's eyebrows lifted. "Texas? That's a long way from here." Lila shrugged. "Had to leave in a hurry. Sheriff took a dislikin' to me." Elias chuckled. "Can't imagine why." She shot him a glare, but there was no real heat in it. "I don't take kindly to bein' told what to do." Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Out here, you do what you gotta to survive. But you don't take from folks who got nothin' to spare. That's the difference between us and you." Lila set the bowl down, her expression unreadable. "Survival's survival. Don't matter how you do it." Elias shook his head. "It matters." The silence stretched again, thick and heavy. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters like it was trying to get in. Lila's gaze flickered to the window, then back to the twins. "What if I told you I ain't got nowhere else to go?" Caleb's expression didn't change. "That ain't our problem." Elias, though, studied her for a long moment. "Ain't sayin' it is. But we ain't monsters, neither." Lila's fingers tightened around the blanket. "So what, you're offering charity now?" Elias stood, grabbing a spare bedroll from the shelf. "Ain't charity. It's a trade. You help out round here till the storm breaks, then you move on. No stealin', no trouble." Lila's eyes narrowed. "And if I say no?" Caleb's voice was flat. "Then you're out in the cold. Your choice." She looked between them, weighing her options. The storm outside was a beast, and she wasn't fool enough to think she could outrun it. "Not tonight." "Fine. But I ain't your servant." Elias tossed the bedroll to her. "Didn't ask you to be. Just pull your weight." Lila caught it, her fingers brushing against the rough fabric. "And what happens when the storm's over?" Caleb's gaze was steady. "You walk away. And we don't see you again." She should have been relieved. Should have been planning her next move, figuring out how to turn this to her advantage. But as she unrolled the bedroll near the fire, her mind was elsewhere. The twins were nothing like the men she'd known, men who took what they wanted, who saw her as nothing more than a pretty face or an easy mark. Elias and Caleb didn't look at her like that. They looked at her like she was a problem. And for the first time in a long time, Lila wasn't sure how she felt about that. The night wore on, the fire burning low. Lila lay on her bedroll, staring at the ceiling, listening to the twins move around the cabin. They didn't snore, didn't toss and turn. They were still, like the mountains themselves. She told herself she wasn't curious. Told herself she didn't care. But as the hours stretched and the storm raged outside, she found herself wondering what it would be like to stay. Just for a little while. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the cabin in a dim, flickering glow. Lila lay on her bedroll, her back to the twins, but she wasn't asleep. She could hear them breathing, slow and steady, like the rhythm of the mountains themselves. She told herself she wasn't listening for anything else. Certainly not the way Elias shifted on his cot, or the quiet creak of Caleb's chair as he leaned back, his rifle resting across his lap. She shouldn't have been thinking about them at all. Lila rolled onto her back, staring up at the rough-hewn ceiling. The storm still raged outside, the wind howling like a pack of wolves, but the cabin was solid, unyielding. She'd been in worse places, jails, hideouts, the back of a wagon with a posse hot on her trail. But none of those places had felt like this. None of them had felt like a choice. She sat up abruptly, the blanket pooling around her waist. The twins were watching her. She could feel it. Can't sleep. Elias's voice was low, rough with the weight of the night. Lila crossed her arms. Not used to sharing a room with two bears. Caleb smirked, though his eyes stayed sharp. You're the one who barged in. She shot him a look. I didn't exactly have an invitation. Elias stood, stretching his massive frame before tossing another log onto the fire. Sparks flared up, casting his face in sharp relief. You could have kept walkin'. Found another cabin. Another storm to ride out. Lila's jaw tightened. And miss out on all this hospitality? Caleb chuckled, but it wasn't a warm sound. You're a terrible liar, Lila Dawson. She bristled. I ain't lyin'. Then why'd you pick this place? Elias asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Why here? Why us? Lila hesitated. She could lie. She was good at it. But something in the way Elias looked at her, like he already knew the answer, made the words stick in her throat. Because I heard about you, she admitted finally. The Mountain Man twins. Folks say you're the only ones crazy enough to live this high up, this far out. Say you don't take no nonsense. She glanced at Caleb. Say you're the kind of men who don't let nothin' slide. Caleb's expression darkened. And what else they say? Lila met his gaze, unflinching. That you're fair. Even when you ain't got no reason to be. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Elias stared at her, his eyes searching hers like he was trying to dig out the truth. You came here lookin' for something more than shelter, didn't you? Lila's fingers curled into the blanket. Maybe I did. Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. What'd you want from us, Lila? She swallowed hard. I don't know. Elias let out a slow breath. That's the first honest thing you've said all night. Lila stood abruptly, the blanket falling to the floor. I ain't here to be your charity case. I ain't here to be nothin' to you. Caleb was on his feet in an instant, his voice a growl. Then why are you here? Because I'm tired. The words burst out of her before she could stop them. Tired of runnin'. Tired of lookin' over my shoulder. Tired of bein' alone. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and exposed. Lila's chest heaved, her hands clenched at her sides. She waited for the laughter, the mockery. But it didn't come. Elias's voice was soft, almost gentle. Ain't no shame in that, Lila. She turned away, her throat tight. Don't. Caleb stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Don't what? Tell you the truth. Lila whirled on him, her eyes burning. You don't know me. You don't know nothin' about me. We know enough, Elias said quietly. We know you're stubborn, reckless, and you got a mouth on you that'd make a mule blush. Lila's lips twitched despite herself. And Caleb's voice was gruff. And you ain't as tough as you pretend. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because he was right. And for the first time in years, someone had seen through her. The fire crackled, the only sound in the cabin. Lila's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. What now? Elias exchanged a glance with Caleb, some silent understanding passing between them. Now you sit down, and you tell us the truth. All of it. Lila hesitated, then nodded. She sank onto the chair Caleb pulled out for her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Ain't much to tell. Caleb sat across from her, his arms crossed. Start with why you're really here. She took a deep breath. I was runnin' from a gang down in Texas, led by a man named Harlan Graves. He's got a bounty on my head, said I stole from him. But it was the other way around. Her voice dropped. I took what was mine. And he ain't the kind to let that go. Elias's expression darkened. So you came north. Lila nodded. Figured the mountains to be the last place they'd look. But I didn't count on the storm. Or you too. Caleb leaned forward. And now? She met his gaze, her voice steady. Now I don't know. Elias stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You stay here. Till the storm passes. Till you figure it out. Lila looked up at him, her heart pounding. And then. Caleb's voice was firm. Then you decide what kind of life you want, Lila Dawson. The kind where you keep running. Or the kind where you stand your ground. The words settled over her, heavy and full of promise. She looked between the twins, seeing not just two mountain men, but something else, something she hadn't dared hope for in a long time. A chance. Lila took a deep breath, the weight of the night lifting just a little. I'll stay. Elias nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Then welcome to our home, Lila. Outside, the storm still raged. But inside the cabin, for the first time in a long time, Lila felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt safe.